Okay, this is the Coach Haas podcast, sponsored by Sports Rehab PA, Bucks County's premier sports rehab and performance training, and also our other sponsor, Bioptimizers. Mike, tell us a little bit about Bioptimizers.
Bioptimizers. So it's the product I like is Masszymes, digestive enzyme, helps you to get the most out of the food that you're taking in. If you have an active lifestyle or you're an athlete, getting in lots of protein, carbs, the Masszymes helps to break that down so you get the most out of the nutrients you're getting. Kind of helps to, dissipate some of that bloating, some of that, conjunction going on in your stomach. You also can combine it with the P3OM, the probiotic. Take that at night, helps to break things down overnight. I've used it for probably over about a year now, and I love the results. Joe, you've used it yourself, feeling pretty good on it. So if you check them out, you could use the code JUICY for 10% off and try it out, see how you feel.
Nice. Hey, Mike, this is pretty interesting. We have a quick turnaround. We did a fantastic podcast last night, and we're going to follow that up with something that could be even just as amazing. We've been so much into this ACL realm, and you happen to get into a BFR, a blood flow restriction course that Trent was teaching, and then you guys kind of got in the conversation. That spun off, and you have been on my ass for about 2 weeks now. We got to get Trent on. We got to figure out a way to get him on. So Trent is super busy. He's got a lot going on. So we found time in the middle of a Friday afternoon. So we're back on a Friday afternoon. I didn't even get a chance to shave from last night. So I'm still growing in my wisdom highlights still. So I got to trim them down a bit. But without any further ado, Trent, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And welcome to the show.
Thank you guys so much for having me. And I'm really excited to share some of the passion, our mutual passions around what we're doing. So excited to be here.
Awesome. So you are, you're the president of Rebound Vitality.
That's correct.
Okay.
Rebound Vitality is an innovative wellness program that is provided to police, fire departments around the U.S. And we currently contract with over 250 different departments across the U.S.
Wow. So again, we always go back into how this came about, right?
Sure.
Your 20 or so years of being in this. I don't want to, you were very young when you started. So
exactly.
Yeah, yes. So kind of take us back to how you are where you are now.
Yeah. So, I'm a physical therapist by trade. Got my master's degree, started in a sports medicine practice in Phoenix, Arizona. I was very fortunate very early on in my career that I was with a group that we did a lot of professional baseball. So actually the first part of my career was just seeing overhead athletes. So we worked with a lot of the major league teams there in Phoenix with spring training. We had contracts with them to do physicals and all that. And as I was going through my career, a couple of years into it, 3 years into it, I had my own practice at this point. And I was seeing a lot of ACL reconstructions. And at the point where I decided to really make this a calling, or felt like I was called to do this, at that time, we had a large clinic, we had 10 therapists, and we had a week where we had 22 ACL reconstructions come in over a 1 week period. 22 over a 1 week period.
Wow.
And because it was primarily what we were known for is our aggressive rehab program on ACL reconstructions. And as I was seeing these kids, and this is, you got, keep in mind, this is back in, I hate to date myself, but late 90s, early 2000, so I'm watching these kids watching their gait patterns as they're done with rehab. It's part of their discharge. And I'm like, man, those movement patterns, I know intuitively are bad for their ACL. And so I actually went back, did my doctorate with a focus in biomechanics and motor learning at Northern Arizona University. I was actually part of the first class, so I actually got to tailor it really to what I wanted to do, and really started to get into the motor learning aspects of how to change motor patterns with ACL reconstructions, how to really treat and approach the biomechanics related to ACL reconstructions. And it was at that point that I really started to film people. So I started filming my athletes through a series of motions, Went from that to a slow motion technology called Dartfish, where we were filming people and created a scoring methodology around it. We were doing, I trained about over 100 therapists on how to do that. The problem was I was finding that there was still way too much subjectivity to it. Depending on the camera angle, how the camera is positioned, the interpretation of the therapist. So I felt like there still needed to be a more objective way of doing this. And so as I'm continuing my clinical practice, I'm doing this kind of on the side. It's like, how do I develop this? So I ended up getting tied up with Microsoft and their very first release of what's called SDK, a software development kit for the new Connect that was coming out. And so we got tied up with Microsoft. I actually left the PT field for about 3 years trying to program the Xbox, basically the Kinect camera, to do what we were doing visually with our eyes.
Wow.
And, I was very fortunate. We were working with one of the top 12 Microsoft Kinect programmers, and we spent about 3 years on that project, and unfortunately just found that the Kinect was not accurate enough. There's light issues. It works off of kind of a laser approach where you got a dot that hits your nose, a dot that hits your cheek, and the time difference between those two is how it makes a map. And so it's sensitive
Gotcha.
to light, it's sensitive to speed. So we scrapped it after 3 years in a multi-million-dollar project.
Wow.
Went back to the PT world, got back into clinical practice, and partnered up with a company out of Australia called DorsaV that has a 3D wearable sensor. It's called an IMU, inertial measurement unit. So I partnered, I'm a firm believer God has a path for everybody. And, I just emailed.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I just emailed their website, and one of their salespeople contacted me and said, "Oh yeah, we'll have the CEO call you." And I'm like, "Okay, that's a nice blow off." Right. So long story short, he called me. We had a discussion. He flew from Melbourne, Australia, met me in Colorado where I was teaching a course. We sat down over dinner and decided we were going to do something together. Their technology by far at the time was the most accurate. It's within 3% of a Vicon system, which is the biomechanics lab. And the way that they were bringing it to the market, there was a huge opportunity to integrate the movement assessment that I created with their technology. So that was around 2015. We actually we developed it in 2016, but commercialized it in 2017. Since the launch, we have about 450 systems across the US right now. And it's been used on over 29,000 athletes. And we've got about 7 major research projects going on with it. So most of it is right now focusing around return to sport. Return to sport after ACL reconstruction is kind of like the hot topic right now. Like, how do you
that hits right into our wheelhouse, huh, Mike? I mean,
Right,
that's now I understand why you wanted to get you on so fast.
Yeah. And so, we've got this really cool research project going on where there's a patient reported outcome form called the TSK-11, TAMPA scale for kinesiophobia 11 form. For listeners that don't know it, it's been highly associated with re-injury rate. Matter of fact, if you score 19 or greater on that test, you're 13 times more likely to tear your ACL upon return to play.
And this is just a questionnaire.
Right. It's just a questionnaire. And so what we've found is that there's studies that have also tied that particular questionnaire to movement. So showing that if you perform poorly on that questionnaire, you perform poorly in movement. So what we're seeing is that we've got a study going on right now. It's a multi-site study. I want to say we have just over 400 subjects right now. And what we're seeing is that when people perform poorly on the TSK-11, we see specific tests that we look at. We're seeing those results correlate. And so as they improve performance on those movements, their TSK-11 scores improve. And so, that's kind of been our biggest wheelhouse right now is ACL reconstruction, rehab, ACL reconstruction prevention, ACL reconstruction return to sport. But what I will tell you is we all know biomechanics is biomechanics. You improve biomechanics, yes, you reduce risk for ACL, but you also reduce risk for ankle injuries, hip injuries, low back injuries.
You mean they
And
all tie in together,
they
Trent?
do. Can you believe
Wow.
it? And
Wow.
get this.
Okay.
Here's the mind-blowing effect. Okay. You improve biomechanics and performance improves. Power output improves. Vertical jump
Wow.
improves. Sprint speed improves. So what we're seeing is that people are using it in a lot of different ways. You know, that 450 I told you goes across the NFL, the NBA. We have NHL teams that are using it. We've got colleges that are using it. And then obviously a lot of PT clinics, performance centers, et cetera.
How often are you using that TAMPA test with them? Are they getting that every time they come in for a training session, or is that every?
No, so we do it. We do it every time we do a movement assessment.
Okay.
And what the research shows us is from a movement assessment perspective, functional movement perspective, to get clinical meaningful improvement, you have to give it at least every 6 to 8 weeks so that they can make those motor changes, make those strength changes, and then reassess. And we've seen the same thing with the EMI, because the EMI stands for Athletic Movement Index. When you do the test too close together, you know, you get minimal change,
Right.
but and it's discouraging to people, like, oh, I only improved this much, but yeah,
Right.
but you've improved. So that 6 to 8
progress
weeks
is progress, right?
Yeah, progress is progress, but that 6 to 8 weeks is really kind of that window to show a clinically meaningful improvement.
Gotcha.
You know, and I'd say the other thing that makes it so unique is we actually measure, you know, what we call frontal plane motion, right? So everybody knows, like, if I'm standing on one leg and my knee goes out to a varus position and into a valgus position, we know that's bad. But the difference of what we measure is I can measure that. I can actually put a meaningful measure on that. I can tell you if you went 10 or 15 degrees of
Gotcha.
valgus.
So if you're 10 or 15 and you're 10 the next time we do this,
Yes.
we've made a 5-degree improvement.
Yes, improvement. But more importantly is we measure speed. So if you were to stand up right now and take your knee and go to 20 degrees of valgus, it probably wouldn't hurt you. But if you did that at 250 degrees per second, you'd rupture something. And that's what we know. So we now have speed barriers by which we have a speed barrier for single leg squat, a single leg hop, a hop plant. So we know that if you fall outside of that barrier, you're at greater risk. And so what it's allowing us to do, and quite honestly, I find speed is actually more important than degree of motion. So you can if you can control your 20 degrees of valgus, it's not, I mean, I just use that example, right? Standing up, move your knee to 20 degrees. You can control that. But if you don't control the speed at which it happens, that to me is a much bigger issue. Much bigger issue.
So does deceleration, yeah, Mike, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, Trent, you know, from now doing BJJ and getting involved in jiu-jitsu, when I trained Gracie, joint locks and, you know, you do different holds and stuff. It's not even so much the force, but it's the angle and the speed that the force is applied.
Yes.
Small force at the right section can cause a break, you know? So, Joe, what we're going to ask is I was going to ask Trent if we could talk about what the problem is with the current return to sport tests right now.
Yeah, that's a little bit more important. I was just going to kind of butt off of something, but go ahead. Yeah.
So if you could explain a little bit of that, Trent, of what you've seen and what the problem is with the current tests that are out there now, so the listeners, the coaches and the parents and the athletes can understand why, even though if they pass these tests, why are we still having second tears of ACLs like months later or even a year later? And then why, even though they say they passed that, there's still issues.
Yeah, you know, and that's a great point. And quite honestly, that's why, you know, this is such a hot topic right now in sports medicine. You know, the current criteria that we use for return to play, number one, there is no standard criteria. The other problem with that is that, quite honestly, is that the research shows, number one, there was a REN study published in the American Journal of Sports Medicine 2018 that showed that, you know what, you can have 100% symmetry, because so we use a term called Limb Symmetry Index. How does your right side compare to your left side? And it's usually expressed as a percentage. So if you're within 90%, that's typical kind of barrier, 90%. If you're 90%, you're good to return to play. So with the assumption of that whole thought process is that your good side is actually good. And what we know is that a lot of times that's not the thing.
Yeah.
And that's really what the REN study showed. The REN study showed basically that you can have 100% limb symmetry index. But if you jump and both knees dive in towards midline and you collapse your knees in towards midline, you're still at great risk. So, you know, the assumption is by this limb symmetry index measure is that you're measuring against a limb that biomechanically is safe. And
Thank you.
the difference of what we do is we base our limb symmetry index on, are you symmetrical right to left, but also are you within those speed barriers and those motion barriers?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you can be 100% symmetrical of crap.
Yeah.
And it's still crap, right?
Right. And listen, that was the example that we used last night. That one of these PTs is tied into this whole deficit thing. Meanwhile, they seem to be ignoring the fact that when we try to get down into a quarter of a squat or a quarter of a split squat, we're receiving pain at the site. But they insist that, you know, well, as long as we can get that deficit shorter, she can go back to light running.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, no, but we're still trying to deal with the pain issue. So let's assess why we're having pain.
Yeah, pain will inhibit strength. We all know that. I mean, it's you know, it's back to the pain theory. Pain inhibits strength. You know, so that's a part of it, is really trying to get over that. One, you know, make sure they have good range of motion. Make sure that they've got pain-free range of motion. The other thing too that we do with the EMI is, we all know this, right? You get that athlete who does a single leg squat on their good side and they go good depth. They go on their opposite side and they do half that depth. So why do they do that? One, you know, they may have pain. They may feel some sense of pain, but also subconsciously, they may be aware that if I go to 45 degrees, I'm going to lose control. And so what we actually do is we measure how much, we call it tibial inclination because it's off the tibia. We measure how much tibial inclination you have with every rep, because it should be symmetrical to the opposite side. Because if you're not symmetrical to the opposite side, it's hard for me to say, if you're only, you know, 100 degrees per second here, what are you if you've gone down 15 more degrees? Probably a lot higher speed, because you can't control it.
Yeah, so that's what we're seeing with the return to sport test, the classic one, which is the single leg hopping one. But the majority of these kids can't even stand on one leg, period, without seeing torsion or some type of, like you said, corkscrewing, Trendelenburg, retro-Trendelenburg. So their foundation is unstable, and then they're going and they're competing in a test with plyometric load on it, and they might get to the distance or get the speed they need to complete. But then, you know, in order to get there, like you said, they look like crap to get there.
They do. And I apologize, I'm looking off to the side here. I'm actually pulling up a presentation because there was a really good study that actually showed that when you use the current criteria for return to play in athletics, that only 13% of people actually pass it. So if you use what, and here's what I will tell you. So it's the tool study, and I don't remember what year it was. That's why I was trying to pull it up, and apparently it's been a while since I pulled it up. So the tool study basically showed that, and that's TOOLE for those who want to look it up, American Journal of Sports Medicine. I don't remember what year. But if you pull up that study, what it showed is that the criteria was, number one, that you have a patient-reported outcome. You have to pass that. Number two, you had a series of single leg activities that you had to pass. And the passing criteria was 90% of the contralateral limb. And what they found is that athletes at 9 months post-op ACL reconstruction, only 13% actually passed all of that criteria based on what the research tells us should be passing criteria. Now, here's the problem, okay? So we've been doing a ton, like I said, we've done 29,000 movement assessments. The EMI collects 1,500 data points for every single assessment that we do. So we have over 39 million data points related to human movement. And when you look at a data set that massive, there's a lot of things that you learn. And one of the things that we've learned is that a 16-year-old female soccer player moves differently than a 16-year-old lineman who moves differently than a 16-year-old running back.
Mhm.
And what puts one at risk versus another at risk is very, very different.
Yeah.
The problem is that we have gone off of, and I hate to say this, and I don't want to create a step on a hornet's nest here, but the FMS has used a passing score for no matter what you are. Matter if you're an athlete, if you're a tactical athlete, firefighter, police officer, 16-year-old versus professional football player, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I will tell you is that it is very different. It's very different by age, by gender, by sport, by position. And all of those things are in level of sport, Division I versus Division II versus Division III. So all of those things are factors which should play into it. What it is right now, we don't know. We don't know what normative values are for a 16-year-old elite level high school soccer player versus a mediocre soccer player at that same age, right? So we don't know that yet. But we're trying to get to the point, at some point, we will have enough data that we'll be able to do that. But right now, it's just, we're trying to break that out. So I think that's, there's so many flaws with the ways, and that's one of the things I love about research. I wish, and Mike, you and I have talked about this, I wish more physical therapists would get actually into the research, because it makes you make a lot of questions. Like, why the hell am I measuring LSI if I can be 100% symmetrical if both sides look like crap? Like, I still know that person's at risk. And that's really where I think we need to look at research, evaluate the research, and then come up with our own questions about, well, does this make sense, right? So like the whole thing I said about the 16-year-old, different positions, different genders, different sports, that to me was a question that's not being answered yet. It's not out there,
Yeah. And that's why we're very interested in this software that you have developed, because what Joe and I are realizing were these tests weren't making any sense. And I can look at the quality of the movement and say, yeah, they passed, but like crap to get to the finish line there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my analogy is you could floor your car with the emergency brake on and win, but you just destroyed your car to get there, which is what athletes are doing. And the parents get stuck on this when, as soon as they hear a surgeon say you're ready to run, that's all they hear. And we talked about this with the surgeon last night, and he emphasized that it's very important that those who are working with the athletes in the facilities that have the means to test them, such as strength coaches, PTs, trainers, they have the ability to look at this. So what we're finding is extremely valuable. And you can't account for a surgeon that just says, yeah, you're ready to run, because sometimes they're going by a time-based criteria versus sometimes the movement-based criteria. So saying, oh, well, at 4 months, the tissue should be able to withstand these forces, so you're okay. But we're not looking at the movements to pass. So the player and the parent gets that in their head, and that's all they hear. Right. And then when they see that they're still failing these things, they get upset because they thought they got the green light, and then we're saying, no, you have the red light. And they're getting frustrated because it's clashing. So we're trying to get that information out as to why. So we started using some more concrete stuff from like FMS systems and getting them to understand that you can't just get one answer from an FMS. I know Gray Cook has emphasized that. And there are some people that are very stuck on that. Well, we did the FMS, they're good. No, it's FMS. It could be a Y balance. It's a motor control screen. It's an FCS. It's a battery of these tests to give you all these information to get a better look at the athlete. But as we talked about, the FCS takes time and it's cumbersome, even though it will show the symmetry. It gives you the data where they are, and then you note down the quality of the movement and it look like that. It still takes a lot of time. And if you want to do a bunch of athletes in research, it sounds like it'd be very efficient to be able to use some type of software. Like you said, this thing can bang things out in 15 minutes and give them all that concrete stuff. So that's why we're very intrigued about this, because if we could get this to these clubs and these teams and have these athletes see this and understand what's going on, it'll make total sense. Just like this one athlete that Joe had me look at, they have been, like I told you, I messaged you, they were going for PT at 6 months and for 6 months, and the PT was stuck on that strength comparison. But again, if you're comparing crap to crap, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
And I found, like 15 things that were wrong. And you could see that the athlete and the parent were very upset. And I'm saying, well, look, a lot of these things are missed. There's still deficiencies here, and this is why Joe can't do what he needs to do with them, because they're not ready for that phase because the foundation is still really bad.
Well, and how, I mean, let's go back to the basic. How are we measuring strength? Are we measuring that with a handheld dynamometer? Are we doing that with a biodex? Because biodex makes a lot of sense, because usually when you're in sports, you sit down in a flexed posture and then maximally contract your quads and your hamstrings. It's a very functional position. I don't think so. Right. So it goes back to, again, part of these flaws in the methodology. The biodex has been used since the 60s and 70s. Like, are we not beyond that? Like, are we seriously not beyond that? That's where we're still at.
Yeah.
So, to me, and we did this presentation at Combined Sections meeting last year when it was in Denver. And oh my God, I got chewed up by these PhD biomechanists, researchers in the ACL realm, because heaven forbid I mentioned something that they hadn't thought of, and that was speed.
Yeah.
And that was around the speed of valgus and how I feel that is so important based on the data that we're seeing. But again, it goes against what we've done traditionally since I started as a PT in 97. Like, if we haven't changed since 97, that's a problem.
That's a long time without any changes there.
Yeah, and it goes back to, we should be able to leverage of the reason that we developed the EMI the way that we did. Number one,
Trent, I don't mean to cut you off there.
Yep.
Do me a favor, repeat that again, because we froze there. Repeat that, what you just talked about there. Yeah.
So part of it is we've not changed since the 90s and early 2000s. And, I'm a firm believer that we have to change with technology. It's a big reason, or a big driver, for why we developed the EMI the way that we did, because we wanted it to be efficient, that you could use it in mass physicals. So we've got this so that I can go to a team, an organization, and we can process about 120 athletes a day. So we have multiple systems to do that. I'll give you a perfect example. I'm just in the process right now of scheduling to do 1,750 firefighters, which we're going to be doing over multiple weeks.
Wow.
But we're running through about 380 of them in 1 week. And so, we're getting it's over 480 because it's going to take us 2.5 weeks to get 1,750. So that being said, I mean, we're getting mass numbers very quickly and efficiently. The other piece of that is I'm taking the air out of it. I'm taking my eyeballs out of it. I'm no longer relying on Trent Nessler's ability to determine if that's a valgus, how much valgus is that, what speed is that at, taking all that subjectivity out of it.
Wow. Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you about you had mentioned very early on, the aggressive ACL return. Mm-hmm. And then you just talked about the different level of the athlete, the age, the sport that they're playing. Does that change your protocol and your rehab moving forward? And when you say aggressive, what are your return to play times?
Yeah, well, so let me see. So I worked in Birmingham with a guy by the name of Kevin Wilk, which in our PT world is very well known.
Yep.
And Dr. James Andrews, who's also very well known. Dr. Andrews was always very adamant and had some good research behind this, that for every month less than 9, you add 5% risk with every month. So at 9 months, you're at a 20% risk. You go down to 8 months, you're now at 25. You go down to 7 months, you're now at 30. So your risk increases every month that you go less.
Gotcha.
And that's what the research shows. That being said, I personally feel like we suck at ACL rehab. I'll give you a perfect example. I just recently came off a massive knee injury from jiu-jitsu. Posterior lateral corner. I had a medial posterior root, medial menisco from anterior to posterior. I had a MCL tear, osteochondral defect on my femur, and a displaced fracture in my hand. Pretty messed up. I started BFR day 2, and I was getting messages because I was posting all this on Instagram, and I was getting messages in my Instagram inbox going, "What in the hell are you doing? Like, why are you starting BFR day 2?
Right.
And quite honestly, why not? You know, what I found is that the earlier I start BFR, aside from, you know, contraindications, like if there's some contraindications there, I'm not going to do it. If somebody's having a total knee, you know, and they're on blood thinners, I'm not going to be doing that, right? I hate to say this, but I'm 52 years old, so I'm a little bit of an older athlete. You know, I have no health complications. I got no risk for clots or anything like that. Why would I not start that? You know,
Right. Right.
and what I found is, you know, I was able to go back to the mats 3 months ahead of schedule. You know,
3 months.
3 months ahead of schedule. I am back now probably 70%. You know, I've this week alone, I trained 5 days this week on the mats.
Yeah, I've been seeing the posts.
Yeah, which, you know, I got off. I'm 11 weeks as of today. So, you know, again, you know, part of that, obviously, you know, I'm healthy. You know, I've worked out my whole life. I have good nutrition. I do good hydration. I do everything, all the pieces, Mike, like we talk about, right? Like you need to do your nutrition, you need to do your hydration, you need to have your recovery supplements. I do all of that stuff, right? But I'm a firm believer that my quads came back faster because I started BFR early on. So when I say aggressive, what I don't mean is getting them back to the field
Sooner.
faster, because
Right.
that was a big flaw. So I'll tell you. So I travel all over the U.S. and the ACL protocols from Pennsylvania to California are drastically different.
Mhm.
We still have some areas of the country where they will put you in a locked knee brace for 4 weeks until 4 weeks out
Wow.
from an
Complete
ACL,
immobilization. Wow.
after an ACL reconstruction. And then you start PT 2 weeks out after your ACL
Why?
reconstruction.
That's
When I was in
6 weeks.
I know,
Wow.
when I was in Birmingham, we started ACL reconstruction the next day.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so you know, there's such a drastic difference in the way that we approach ACLs across the country. There is no standardized program the way that we do it. And in my personal opinion, is kinesiophobia would not be such a big issue if we started single limb training earlier. If we got people on one leg faster, we started getting them used to putting that feeling comfortable on that limb, having control of that limb. That what I find is, and I teach this in my courses, the earlier you start single limb training, the less kinesiophobia you're going to have.
Yeah, yeah. I try to get them to even just weight shift onto that thing as soon as I can, you know. Holding on, I mean, so, you know, it's like getting used to it and I feel like it's going to buckle, but something to get that feedback from the floor throughout the whole limb, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because, like, you know, and again, it goes back to how do we, so my orthopedic surgeon's a very good orthopedic surgeon. He wanted me non-weight bearing for 8 weeks because of the posterior lateral, or because of the posterior root tear, and then also because of the OCD. And ironically, the couple of days after my surgery, I was looking through American Journal of Sports Medicine, and there happened to be a paper published on posterior root tears in earlier weight bearing. So I sent it to him. And then I sent him what I was going to try to do. And he's like, you know what? This is a good study. You're a healthy guy. You know what you should be looking for. Let's go ahead. And I started weight bearing at about 5 weeks out. Which again, he wanted me to wait until 8 weeks before I even started weight bearing.
Right. Right.
You know, so at 6 weeks, I was completely off crutches. That being said, you know, not everybody can do that. You know, it's again, that goes back to evaluating the research, applying that to your patient population, and then monitoring your patient as you go through. I think, you know, we get stuck in as physical therapists. You know, I see that more today. Like I said, I graduated back in '97. You know, we weren't given a protocol. We were given guidance, right? And now today, people come out, it's like, I have to do X, Y, and Z with my patient. As soon as I'm done with X, Y, and Z, I send E-stem, right?
Yeah.
And what it should be, again, is a guidance on how do we do that. But quite honestly, and Mike, you and I both know this, we all know this, is that you can't do that with every PT.
Right.
Because then you're going to start screwing people up.
Yeah. Well, what we're finding is that a lot of these kids coming in are so under the mark of basic function that there's so much that needs to be done that it's mind blowing. And it's like you try to hit every mark. So, you use a great example of the spiral technique for the the RDL, which is awesome. And I've been implementing that immediately because it's a great concept, because I've been doing other banded techniques. I'm like, this is great with the CLX. And I said it to Joe, and now we're starting to use it with a lot when they're appropriate for that. But the problem is trying to get them to some of these movements takes forever. They have locked up ankles. We're talking like these kids are playing on 5 degrees of dorsiflexion. The anterior tips don't work. The feet are all scrunched up. Their calves are just stiff. And then on top of that, they have all this weakness. So it's like, where do we start? So it's like, I have to start them with some basic table stuff. They can't even do a side plank raise modified with the knees bent.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the performance measure of a side plank.
Yeah.
I can't even get them knees bent, going up without the shoulder hurting and them crunching up and trying to get them to understand pelvic control. So it's like, we have all this basic stuff. So I'm like hammering them with stuff to do, and it can be overwhelming, but I'm like, look, like, we have to build a foundation somewhere, but they are so under the mark because it's been soccer, and nothing else. It's TikTok and Snapchat, soccer. And that's what they do. They hop off the couch from a banana position in TikTok, doing their little things with their friends, and they go onto the field and play soccer. No warm up, like nothing. So they're so it's just so, like, I guess, like malnourished in a way from just motor control and even nutrition. We have an athlete who comes in, I'm like, I asked him, when did we eat? He's like, I had toast at 11. I'm like, dude, it's 6 o'clock. Like, come on, man. He's yawning when he's walking around. If he listens to this, he knows who he is.
Yes. Yep.
Like, guys, we got so much work to do here. So that's why, like, trying to build this network of this education with guys like you, Trent, is so important, because people got to hear this stuff. They got to understand.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is I think, for me, ACL rehab is comprehensive. It's not just the PT aspect that we normally do. I talk to athletes about hydration. I give them a P chart and show them where their P should be, how to monitor that, the color and the odor of it, and what they should be doing for hydration. I have them do a food log. I have them write 3 days worth of food so I can see what is their actual intake that they're taking in, so I can see and give them some guidance on nutrition. I was telling an athlete, like, do you want to run like a Ferrari or do you want to run like a Pinto? Because the gas you put in that engine is going to determine what you get out of that engine. And if you're putting shit in the engine, you're going to get shit out, right? So it's, to me, and it's weird because I think as physical therapists, the majority of our profession rarely talks about hydration, rarely talks about nutrition. And how can you not?
Well, most are
such a key part.
I mean, I can admit in my early career, I didn't really know enough because I didn't get it. And it wasn't until I got more competitive with athletics and I got my own sponsors and I started to get the right information that I started learning. So I knew where to kind of direct people. But even then, I'm still not 100%. So I'm trying to learn more.
So let me say, you know what, that is I agree with you. And I think that's just pure laziness on our profession side. Because you didn't get it. Well, shit, I didn't get 3/4 of what I got, right? You have to go get it. As a clinician, that is your professional responsibility, that if you're going to treat athletes, treat freaking athletes, treat them right. Treat them from every aspect.
I think that's part of it. Yes. And, these kids come to me, and again, not a knock on any of these PTs, because I don't even know a lot, but if you didn't play a sport, you weren't athletic, you're not in the same mindset of getting this kid ready to play soccer. This is a physical sport where they're playing 80 to 90 minutes, and you got them sitting down being super passive. Like, we need to get them fired up, get moving. Like, it's just too slow moving. And this is where, Mike and I really just kind of fit together. Like, I was talking to him about this, and he made sense in what he was doing. And then when I started sending people to him, they were coming to me and they were ready for what I needed to do. I know my lane. I'm a strength coach, rehab specialist after the physical therapy has done their job. I'm not, and I find that I'm trying to do this stuff when they're here because I know that I can't progress into other things. They need to, so I do what I can do.
Yeah.
And if I just kind of run into that brick wall, I'll try to. First, I'm always open with the physical therapists that that come in. I try to reach out to them to let them know that this is what I'm doing, and this is the program that I'm running. It's very unique in this area. Nobody's doing what we're doing, and bringing people on like you is amazing stuff. So we can see the forward thinking, not the past thinking.
Well, I'll tell you, Joe. Part of it is that therapists are intimidated by you. You have a knowledge that they don't have.
Right.
And they don't like that.
Right.
And that's a flaw with the system as a whole. What it really should be is a comprehensive approach, and being able to talk to your strength coach and being able to, but you know what, dude, we all know that exists not just in the general population, that exists in pro sports.
Exactly.
Even at the pro level. I mean, there's a lot of teams that the strength house is not talking to the athletic training side or the PT side. And it's
the light bulb doesn't go on so early, because when you come out as a new grad, you're so overwhelmed with just figuring out how to try to deal with people. That's why I never understood how some of these, really, really introverted individuals still make it in a profession. They're very book smart, but they have to be able to, you have to look at someone as a human being. Mm-hmm. You have to connect with them too, because I even have nutrition, conversations, even some of like the elderly patients, they think that cramping is 100% related to hydration and eating bananas. And I'm like, well, if you're looking at the latest research, it's not, you're trying to lift your butt up off a table 5 times, your hamstrings are cramping. But I see you got a giant thing, a bottle of water there,
Yeah.
So it's like you actually are drinking some, and I can't imagine that you're overhydrating yourself. Maybe you are, but the process that maybe most of these average people are hyponatremia, I don't think so, So there's other things that are playing in there. But when you're going through this, and like you said, the sports physical therapy stuff is a specialty area, and a lot of things are being missed. And you start pulling these components where you're saying, well, if we want to be recognized as doctors of anything, we have to start promoting ourselves of that we have the knowledge base of this, and we have to know that we have an understanding of this, and saying, look, I have a basic understanding of this. But if you want to get a prescribed, a program or a meal plan, understanding where to find resources for dietitians, nutritionists, things like that, and get people in the right direction, because it's only going to do them better. How are you going to be able to rehab from a major surgery when you're eating Cheetos?
Right. And the other thing is it requires a more informed consumer. At the end of the day, it requires mom and dad to be more informed. I was, and this was last year, but I was doing a presentation in Texas and got into a conversation with a group of orthopedic surgeons, and the average return to sport for Dallas at that time was 9 months. But then this new group came in, and in order to capture part of the market share, they said, we can get our ACL reconstructions back to sport in 6 months. They didn't do that because it's the best thing for the athlete. They simply did that to get more volume. Yeah. And that's where an informed parent needs to come into play. Yeah. And the guy who's offering a 9-month return to play, he's like, it sucks because I know that's not the right thing for the athlete. Yeah. I can't bash that guy for doing it. I can't bash them professionally, right? And let people know that. But that is unfortunately a lot of times what drives it. And what parents think is, well, gosh, you get him back in 6 months, you must be the better surgeon. That's what it is. Right. Yeah. You have a better technique that you're doing.
I find that as a sticking point too, because when these kids want to get back and they're at 9 months, that 9 to 12 month gap is my hardest conversations with the athlete and the parent, because 85% of my business is female soccer players age 13 to 18. Oof. Right? Yes. And they're not, or they haven't really been strength training prior to this, right?
Yes.
So they have no foundational strength to begin with. So when we get to 9 months, I'm trying to explain to them that we're just getting back to where you were before this injury happened. Now the real work begins.
Right.
Right now you should be on a 6-month strength training program. So now you're at 9 to 15 months, a solid strength training program with a slow progression. Still, to me, I still, and again, when you were saying aggressive, I'm trying to figure out, Well, when I get to that 9 months, and I understand that it's case by case, everyone's going to kind of, move a little bit differently, but I still find that 9 to 12, and Mike and I have had several, that were in around that 12 to 13 month range that had some re-tears. So,
well, I'll tell you, if you looked at any of Timothy Hewitt's work, he actually published a paper that said really what we should be doing is not returning for 24 months. And quite honestly, I don't know if people will ever do that.
Well, that was a point that was brought up last night with Dr. Seward's about time-based and criteria-based, and and where we are in America compared to the UK, as far as if a sophomore were to get hurt at the end of their season, and you're talking 2 years, they basically have now lost out of their scholarship.
Well, and that's it. That you brought up an interesting point, because people try to do that where they make comparisons of ACL research in Australia and the UK, because there's some really interesting research coming out of Australia and the UK. What people need to understand is that socialized medicine. You don't even have an MRI until you are 6 months post-injury.
Yeah.
So you're not even diagnosed with an ACL rupture until you're 6 months post-op, or not 6 months post-op, post-injury.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're not having surgery for like 7 or 8 months.
So there's that 6 months right there.
Right. So
that's very interesting. So, continue, but I was just going to ask if you could touch a little bit on the specialization, because we talked a little bit of that last night, that the biggest waiver against is these parents feel their kids need to be in this stuff since they're age 4 and all year round, because they get the pressure from these coaches, from these clubs, that you have to be present, you have to be available. It's your best chance at getting seen, getting, the recruiters, all that. And Joe and I keep saying, is that third club really worth it? Because if you're really going to do well, if touch on that. I really got to hear this.
Well, and there is a ton of research out there that shows not only are you at less risk for an ACL injury if you do multi-sports versus specialization.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are you at less risk, but you are a better athlete if you are.
Thank you. Exactly. I was just going to say the same thing.
There's multiple studies out there that show that. Matter of fact, there was a really last year, there was a really good study, and I'll have to look up the reference for you. There was a really good study that was done last year where they looked at NBA players, and some of the top performing NBA players all the way through high school were multi-sport athletes. Some of your best athletes out there were multi-sport athletes. And so, the problem is that doing a single sport, specializing in a single sport, puts you at much greater risk. It used to be back in our day that you had soccer season, and then you did track season, and maybe you did wrestling season, and then you came back to soccer. Now it's just like soccer all year long. And that's, you got to give the body rest. You got to move the body in different ways. You got to train the body in different ways. I'm a firm believer that multi-sport athletes have better core control. Mm-hmm. I can't prove that yet. I'm looking to prove that. But core control is absolutely essential. And so many times they get that specialized aspect, and it's just one way,
Now, what about these kids that, the parents say, well, my kid's happy, they love it, all their friends are playing, they don't want to miss out. That's a barrier there. And that the kid is definitely at risk, because you're looking at movement patterns, and you could take someone where maybe you treat them and you're keeping up with your exercises, they're not doing it,
Sometimes I'm a little bit more blunt. Yeah, it's fun if all your friends are driving 100 miles an hour. Maybe you should drive 100 miles an hour too.
Yeah.
All your friends are enjoying it because they're taking drugs. Maybe you should take drugs too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to step up and be a parent.
Yeah.
Say, no, this is for your own safety. Yeah. We're going to do one sport, and you want to do other sports, we'll go other sports. Yeah. But you have a season.
Yeah.
You have a season for a reason.
Yeah. Trent, I brought that up last night. My younger son is a hell of an athlete, and he played baseball, basketball, soccer, but he was a very, very good soccer player. But he loved basketball. So when it came to wintertime, he wanted to shut down from soccer and play basketball. And because he was one of the better players on the team, obviously they needed him, right? They need, where's our best player, or where's one of our best players? I said, well, he's playing basketball because he wants to be a kid and he wants to play other sports, and
Yeah.
to this point, knock on wood, he hasn't had any major injuries, knees, ankles, things like that. And he's an all around athlete.
Right. And I think sometimes parents are just afraid to say no. They're afraid to tell coaches no. They don't want to
Coaches didn't like it. They didn't like it.
Yeah.
I became the bad guy, but
I don't care.
right,
At
exactly.
the end of the day, you know what? At the end of the day,
my
I
kid.
don't care. My
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
It's not your kid.
Yeah.
My kid.
Exactly.
I want my kid to be healthy when he's 20.
Yeah.
You only care about him right now.
Yeah.
I
When
care about him
when they
for a
come in
lifetime.
for the assessment, I literally sit there with the parent and the athlete, and I say, I'm going to treat you like you're my child.
Yes.
If I don't think that you're ready to play,
yeah.
and I wouldn't put Vincent on the field,
Yeah.
I'm not putting, Sally on the field.
Yep.
You're just not ready for it yet,
Yep.
And I hate that. And that's what I'm saying. Like when I get to that 9-month mark, I'm still their friend. You're right.
Yeah.
And then I get to 9 to 12 months. And now I become like the enemy. Like, what's he going to do? Tell us now. Like, I'm only telling you what I see.
Yeah.
You get better, then the answer is going to get better, So,
well, and sometimes it's a motivation to the athlete, right?
Mhm.
Dude, you want to move better? Hydrate, nutrition, do everything that you should be doing to make this better, because right now the system's not moving well.
Trent, at a collegiate level, because there's a big discrepancy between high school versus college. And we had this conversation with one of the athletes. She wants to go to D1, and she was actually scared of meal programs and meal plans. And I said, no, actually, some of those meal plans that they get you on are really good, and they're covering your bases. You can still have fun and eat other stuff, but it's to make sure that before your afternoon workout session, you have a solid fuel base, and it's not, like I said, garbage and you're eating shit before you work out.
Right.
You need fuel. But are you seeing at least some difference at the collegiate level? Because I noticed there's a little bit more organized sessions where they actually have them in there and they're training them, and they're more routine. Where high school is just like, it's a free for all,
Right. And it really depends on the college. It depends on the level of college. Like your D3, no, not so much. D2, a little bit. I had the fortunate opportunity to work with Alabama, which is like the creme de la creme. Like they go in, they have a cafeteria just for the athletes. So you go into the athletic complex, there's a cafeteria in there. You go in there for breakfast, that's where you get your breakfast. They are making sure they print out a schedule for you, a menu for you as an athlete. This is what you're eating, and you just eat it. It's good stuff. Tastes great.
Right.
It's
You're
filling,
just boom.
But somebody's taking care of it for you.
Yeah.
And I go back to the athletes. I'm like, well, why do they do that? Do they do that because they just like to spend more money and they just think that it's a cool thing to do? They do it because it works.
Yeah.
They do it because it works, because it helps them win championships, because it helps them keep their athletes healthy, helps them keep them on the field, because they know when they put junk in the system, when they don't do those things, when you don't eat right, you don't sleep right. When you don't sleep right, you don't heal and you don't perform at optimal levels.
Yeah.
So I think it's, there's
Can't be said any simpler than that, right?
Yeah. Right.
Now, speaking of that, I know we didn't talk enough about the BFR, but were you saying there's some research going on seeing BFR's effects on the ACL graft, maybe getting revascularization earlier? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, there's two effects to BFR. There's one that's a localized effect, and that's really, as you're exercising the muscle. Let me step back for a second. How does BFR work? Basically, what you do is you put the cuff on, the artery has muscle to it, the vein does not. So when you tighten on the cuff, you basically collapse the vein, but the artery is still allowing blood to flow into the muscle. Eventually, like a balloon, the muscle is going to fill up with enough blood that it can't take anymore. So as you're exercising the muscle and pulling all that oxygen off of that blood, the muscle eventually starts to become tired. Once it becomes tired, then what ends up happening is that you're continuing with the exercise, is that the muscle starts to recruit more motor units. That's why you get better quad control after an ACL reconstruction, because you're getting more of that distal quad actually being recruited early on in the process at very low loads. All this is done at very low loads. But the second thing that happens is there's a systemic effect, and that's the biochemical reactions that result from this, right? So as you go through that process, as pH changes, that stimulates growth hormone release. So there is a massive increase in growth hormone release. But the other thing that's released is what is called IGF-1, insulin growth hormone factor 1. And what that does is it actually causes an increase in bone healing. So what the thought is, and from what what they're seeing is that they're seeing that the grafts are taking faster when there's early application of BFR. And what they're associating that with is the fact that there's that insulin growth, that IGF-1 that's being released, that's causing that bone healing to occur within the graft site at a quicker point.
Are there certain exercises that they're looking at? Are they doing open chain?
No, yeah, it really starts with open kinetic chain exercises, just doing your quad sets, your straight leg raises. It doesn't matter what you do with BFR, you're going to get that result. The biggest mistake that PTs do is they think BFR is only one stage. They think it's okay, we're early stage, open kinetic chain only. No, it should be used with closed kinetic chain. I'm well past, I'm back on the mats. I used it today. I still use it as a part of my performance.
Does that become part of your warm-up routine?
So two things. For me, still, I'm not at 100%. So I use it for my cardio. You can actually get an increase in your VO2 max when you combine it with your cardio. So I'm using it in for jujitsu, where the level I'm at, we're usually doing 5-minute rounds. So we do 5 to 10-minute rounds. So your gas tank's got to be really, really freaking good. So I'm constantly pushing my cardio with BFR. So there's that piece to it. The other thing is that we actually have a program that we're developing for our competition team to use that as a part of their warmups, because what we want to do is we want to fatigue them early on as a part of their warmups, so that when they get into really awful situations, I don't know how much people know about jujitsu, but there's two aspects in my mind. There's a couple of aspects to it. Number one is the fatigue and the loss of like thinking through the process. Very much like a chess match. Like what are they baiting me for? What am I doing? Where are my elbows at? Keeping it all in nice and tight and everything. So there's that mental aspect to it. But then there's also the physical aspect to it, right? Can I still do an explosive shrimp to get out of the position? Can I still do an explosive sit-up, right? So there's that aspect to it. So for our jujitsu guys, what I typically have them do is I have them do that at the beginning to kind of fatigue themselves out, and then they'll do some heavy rolls so that they can be going in a fatigue state. Like this is what it's going to be like in competition. For black belts, they do 10-minute rounds. So for our black belts, man, they gotta have a good full gas tank and be able to function when you're completely tired and somebody is smashing you down and they're trying to choke the crap out of you. You got to be able to know how to walk through that in your head, but also be able to physically walk through it.
Right. So it would probably make sense to use blood flow maybe with a certain amount of exercises, and then challenge that athlete with the maybe more demanding things. For example, with a soccer player doing like the spiral technique RDL as the last exercise on the massive fatigue. So I do know there's been research out that said doing some of those stability things when very fatigued, you get more neuromuscular input.
So great point. So we developed a program called ACL Play It Safe. This was a program that was designed with myself, Kramer, and TheraBand. This program was out there it was only recently, the app was recently taken off the market because it's owned by Select Medical. But up until that point, we had done it with over 10,000 athletes. And one of the pieces of the program is what we call fatigue state training. And what I mean by that is we would have them go through their practice, use practice as the fatigue state inducing exercise. And then we would go into this fatigue state training. And it did two things for us. Number one, I didn't have to do the volume that I would normally do to get the same training effect because they're already tired. And number two is from a specificity standpoint, I actually got to work on training them in the state in which they're most likely going to get injured. So really focusing on their core control, really focusing on their single limb control, and doing all of that in a fatigue state. The key is making sure they're doing it with the right mechanics, because that will be the default pattern that they go to when they are fatigued. So fatigue state training to me is huge. it's funny because like, if you look at all the ACL injury prevention programs out there, except for the ACL Play It Safe program, they all do them before practice. I've always felt like, number one, from an efficiency standpoint, that's originally why I started doing it, is from an efficiency standpoint, because I knew I wouldn't have to do the same volume because they're already tired. And what we found is that our injury reduction rate was huge. Like we not only ACLs were over 90%, these are small. So our sample size was about 100. So that 100% was not significant in the means of, because there's only 2 or 3 injuries per year, right? So it wasn't statistically significant. What was statistically significant is we reduced all lower extremity injuries by over 58.2%.
Wow.
So by doing this fatigue state training, so that's ankle injuries, knee injuries, hip injuries. Oh, and by the way, we also reduced concussion. Believe it or not, what we've seen, and there was a study published by Johnson last year, American Journal of Sports Medicine, that showed that an athlete who moves better gets concussed less, because the thought is
The body's not
right. Well, and they're avoiding the concussive event. So now they got the more agility, the more speed to
right.
actually avoid that event versus actually getting
So
collided.
not so much a sitting duck.
Right, exactly.
Speaking of cognition, Trent, you said something interesting to me last time we spoke, that there's some stuff to show that after an injury like ACL, there are some cognitive changes that occur.
There are changes, neuroplastic changes that occur in the higher centers, and those don't just come back. And so there is some visual motor learning that we do to help train those neuroplastic changes. And so, there's a device out there it was developed by a strength coach, actually.
Blaze pods?
Not the Blaze pods. It's called the, oh God, I just drew a blank on it. I'll get the name of it for you. I'll think of it in just a second. But basically it's a platform that's got 5 discs on it, and you have an iPad in front of you. And on the iPad, one of those discs lights up, and you're supposed to touch it without looking. The key is you're not looking.
Yeah.
Because if you look, you're bringing in your visual system. The idea is that you're using just your awareness, body awareness, to be able to touch that. And what studies show is that when you do that kind of training, is that you actually elicit those neuroplastic changes in the higher centers that typically is not trained after an ACL reconstruction.
Because they're constantly trying to look down at their feet. So the less you can get them to look down and to look at other things, it's bringing part of that cognitive piece back in there as well.
Absolutely.
Exactly what a field.
And the Blaze pods are good too, but you look at it. So you're looking at it when you touch it. So you're not making that connection between, you're not taking the visual system out of it, so to speak.
Gotcha.
So when we were talking about late stage, or you were talking about the return to play there, how far along do you take them, or how far along are you in the continuum of care, and when would you start to do that fatigue in the beginning? And then the other part to that is, if I don't have an athlete that goes out to a practice and then comes to me, what are some ways that they would do it if they were in the gym already?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one, I implement parts of the ACL Play It Safe program very early in the rehab. So there's some core training pieces to it that I'll add early on. I think everybody should be doing planks and side planks. We've got some really interesting data on planks and side planks. And we know, there was just a Jong study that was published just this last year that showed that if you lack strength and endurance on plank and side plank, you're 3 times more likely to tear your ACL. So there's a lot of really good data out there on core stabilization. So I start that very early on. I have them do that as a part of their program. The single limb training stuff, I don't typically have them start that until they're doing that in the clinic and they're doing that safely and they can do all of that. Everything that I do at the ACL Play It Safe, they have to be able to demonstrate that in the clinic first and demonstrate that with good technique and safe. Gotcha. So once they're doing that clinically in the clinic and they're doing it safe, I will start to implement that as a part of their program. So it's not meant to replace a strength and conditioning program. So you asked about when do I have them do that? If they're doing a strength and conditioning program, I have them do it after it. If they're doing running, I have them do it after it. So whatever that that fatigue inducing activity is, it can be hooking them up with BFR and having them go through a series of BFR exercises, full
Okay.
body weight squats, things like that, and then moving into that fatigue state training. The beauty of BFR is you can induce fatigue pretty early on in the process.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's been a little bit of what I've been playing around with the straps, trying to like superset stuff, doing, sets of 8, finding the occlusion that, works something, and then going ahead and supersetting it with something else. Cause then you have to get at least a minimum of like 15 reps.
Yeah. So there's a couple of protocols. There's 30, 15, 15, 15, where you
Right.
do it
Yeah.
that way. And then there's 30, 30, 30.
Right.
And for me, I've actually been pushing kind of, they tell you total time of occlusion should not exceed, 30 minutes. What I do is I get on the bike. I've got a sprint protocol I do on the bike, for myself. I'm typically doing that 30 minutes. So I do 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. Today,
Or just release the pressure for 5 minutes.
yes. Yeah. So I put the pressure on for 5 minutes. I release the pressure for 5 minutes. I put the pressure on for 5 minutes.
Right, okay.
So then I went to do leg press. So I did 30, 30, 30 on leg press. And I did 6 sets of that. And then I went to leg extension, abduction, adduction, did 30, 30, 30, and I did 6 sets on that.
Okay.
So 12 sets total, but it's 30, 30, 30. So it's a lot more than that. And my legs were trashed. That
I'd
being
say
said,
so.
yeah, right. But it helped. It again, I'm not doing heavy weights, on my leg press. I'm doing maybe 30% of my max. I still have, with heavy resistance training, I still have, some joint line pain. So I'm being cognizant of that. And I'm still working around that. In jiu-jitsu, I still can't do stand up yet. So I can't throw, you don't throw switch kicks in jiu-jitsu, but I also do Muay Thai. So I can't throw any switch kicks or anything like that yet. So I'm still not doing judo throws or anything like that. Starting all my game from the ground because of that joint line pain. But, it's progressing me along that process. I'm well beyond 30 minutes of compression time. But again, I'm getting really good results out of it. And I think as a practitioner, we have the set protocols, but I think that's part of the art of what we do, right? We have the science of what we do, and then we have the art of what we do, and I would say, I come from a strength and conditioning background. I would say that's where the art comes in, right? Like we can be super creative with the ways that we apply the science.
Yeah. So I remember going back to some of the information. It was one of the physicians was talking about you can do heavier resistance training with it on for performance. Yep. So obviously that would be really hard to do, like a 70% of your 1RM for 15 reps. But can you get something like doing heavier sets that's not like crushing your soul, but good weight with the BFR? If you want to do some heavier squats and you're doing maybe like triples, doubles, or even like sets of 6, and then you're doing that where you're trying to just, do that, rest 60 seconds, do that and do a bunch of sets, and then maybe burn out with maybe like body weight squats or something else that challenges that, a different parameter like that for performance measures. So that's what I've been kind of playing around with too, because sometimes you want to be able to get that stimulus of training a little bit heavy, but you're not trying to crush your legs so they're not sore the next day we can't run or whatever. So I'm kind of fascinated by it,
Yeah, well, and I've gone as heavy as 50 to 60%.
Okay.
I probably wouldn't do 70 to 80% because I still stick in that 30, 15, 15, 15 or 30, 30, 30.
Okay.
Prior to my injury, it definitely helped my squats and my leg presses go up. And there's a lot of studies out there, and I presented to you guys. There's studies out there that shows that it will improve your 1 rep max for squat, your 1 rep max for bench, your 1 rep max for leg press, you name it. So there is a way to apply it. Personally, I agree with Dr. Paulus. You could, in theory, you can probably do that. But in application, it's a hell of a lot harder.
Yeah.
So for me, 60% is about the max that I've been able to go. And I push it pretty damn hard.
Yeah. And what about, the hypertrophy? Because, another thing, I mean, being an athlete, people want to look good. And that's also a thing with also high school, collegiate level athletes. They also want to look good too, but they have to understand that, when you're training for a sport, there's going to be certain aesthetics that come with a certain sport, So, I mean, a soccer player is going to look different than a volleyball player, a football player, et cetera, but they still want to look fit. So they're like, okay, well, if I'm doing some training or I'm doing some time away and I want to maybe do some stuff and not like injure myself, can I do BFR and then I can do some upper body stuff and get a benefit where I can still look good? That might sound appealing to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's a lot of studies out there that show that, the growth hormone. I mean, your growth hormone release is equivalent to heavy resistance training. So the growth hormone concentration levels are similar to when you're doing 80%, 90% of 1 RM.
Wow.
So the growth hormone releases are significant, and I don't know if I use this in lab, but I had an athlete who was a jiu-jitsu black belt, ruptured his biceps in an arm bar. And he came back and I started BFR on him very early on in the process. He was doing PT with his PT. I wasn't seeing him, but I trained with him. So I started him on BFR, started him very early on in the process. He got back to the mats about 3 months ahead of schedule. And he went into his doctor and he had his blood work done. And she's like, holy cow, your testosterone is off the chart. Like, what supplements are you doing? And he's like, I'm not doing any supplements.
Yeah.
So, it makes me wonder because it was a great, I mean, because he was doing it religiously. He got back. I mean, and the guy he's a powerhouse. He's like 220 and he's about my height, and he's ex special forces, just a go-getter. Right. So he was doing farmer carries up and down the street, with BFR on. I mean, it's the kind of athlete you want to work with, right?
Yeah.
Mike, bring them straps over here tonight.
Yeah, exactly. So when he saw his testosterone levels were up like that, he was just like, man, this is amazing.
Now the occlusion pressure has to be at least minimum 20-30%.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So, but now you said more fit people would occlude sooner. So I noticed that with me playing around with it, my tolerance has gotten better with it. I can actually get those things 2 full clicks around, and they feel pretty snug and tight. But the arms are still real sensitive. The arms, it's like I can only go like not even like a fourth, and then it's like if I don't do it, I get tingling. So you gotta find.
Well, you have to understand though too. I mean, look at your fat there versus the typical Tennessean who's got like globs of fat right there. You don't have to go. You don't have to go through that. So. The leaner the athlete is, what I find, the leaner the athlete is, the less pressure they actually need.
So just keep track for the athlete where they're feeling it and keep track of that, and then keep track of basically, the reps, the schemes, things like that. So, because they can keep the pressure basically the same, and they can maybe just increase the reps or the weight. And they're like, that's the pressure that works, the pressure that works. And it's still the same.
The other thing is too, is I increase my own intensity. Like when I work out, it's 30, you do a 30 reps, 30-second rest, 30 reps, 30-second rest, 30 reps, 60-second rest, right? Okay. So what I do is I do 30 second set, 30-second rest, 30 reps, 30-second rest, 30 reps, and then I do 30-second rest before I start the next one.
Okay.
So again, you can increase the intensity by simply decreasing
cutting
the
it
down
between each individual set.
Now I saw on the videos that you had in the course, you had a girl doing like a high intensity workout. It was like one thing to the next.
Yeah.
And we know a lot of people on a time crunch now are very appealed to that, with the growing thing of like the HIIT training, the CrossFit, et cetera. So if I have an athlete, like, well, how can I get time with training between school and things like that? If I'm like, I only have a 30-minute window, can you challenge them with BFR and do a high intensity thing where we're doing, X amount of calories on the assault bike with BFR. Then we're going to do some, box squats, maybe some pull-ups, do that in a little mini circuit. Yep. And then you're like, I guess at every 5 minutes release the pressure.
Yeah,
and then
so I end up taking that cardiovascular protocol and then applying that.
Okay. Interesting. So there you go. So you could get twice the effect in
Yeah.
30 minutes. A quick workout.
Yeah, I tell you, you can get very, very intense with that.
Yeah.
Mo is the lady that we did that with, and she's actually a professional boxer.
Okay.
And we did box jumps with her. We did a lot of we did ball throws and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it, is that you can literally reduce their amount of resistance, make it, almost like a rest day, and they will be cashed by the end of the time they're done without the physiological wear down of the muscle.
Now, what about occluding all four limbs
I
versus
was
like,
just going to say that.
Yeah.
so like
So,
playing around with
yep.
that, like, is that another intensity thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So the more cuffs you involve, the more intensity you get.
Okay.
So for our competitive jujitsu folks, because they're competing at a high level, we'll typically do 4 cuffs on them. So we have upper extremity and lower extremity all at one time. For our beginners, maybe we start with just 2 leg cuffs, and then move to the arm cuffs.
Okay.
It all depends. So
Okay.
you can increase or decrease the intensity simply by the number of cuffs that you put on.
Okay. And now when you're doing this, because I know we talk about types of cuffs, obviously it was rock cuff was the one that you seem to like. We use that in lab. It just seems to be the most versatile. If you're doing those type of workouts, you obviously need one that's portable. So
Yes.
I guess that would make sense.
Well, here's what I'll say. Obviously I teach for rock cuff, so I'm gonna promote rock cuff.
Yeah.
But here's why I chose rock cuff, is because the other cuffs, you've got 2 cuffs out there, and I won't say what they are. There's 2 cuffs out there that fully occlude. I
Okay.
cannot give that to an athlete to do in the gym because athletes, right? Like a little bit is good. So if I
Yeah.
fully occlude,
Yeah.
man, that's gonna be freaking awesome. Like I'm gonna get really good
My
workout.
testosterone is gonna be jacked up.
Right. So that's out of the question. The other one is that does not fully occlude, is also pneumatic, so it blows up. The problem I have with that, I don't like being a spectacle in the gym. So if I'm over in the corner,
Yeah. Yeah.
the nice thing about the rock cuffs is I can crank it on, do my set. I'm not
Yeah.
making a huge spectacle of myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, from a versatility perspective, it's very versatile. I can use it for a lot of different things. It's very efficient, and I don't have to worry about an athlete injuring themselves when they're doing the rock cuff, because it will not fully occlude.
Okay. Nice.
Interesting. Hey, listen, I have 3 questions we want to fire at you here.
Yep.
All right, we come to that time of the show. First question I have for you is, what now is keeping you awake at night? What are some things that are keeping you awake at night? If you're sleeping, because I don't think
Yes.
you're gonna.
Yeah, I do sleep. Probably my 16-year-old driver. If I'm gonna be honest.
That's great. Well, I can relate. I have 2 that drive, and their first year and a half driving, we had 5 accidents. So I can totally get that one. That would keep me awake at night.
Yeah, from a clinical perspective, I would say, we're undertaking a massive amount of testing. We have over 2,450 assessments that we're going to be doing through the months of July to August. So that's probably the thing that keeps me awake the most.
Gotcha.
Is the logistics and scheduling around that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. A question that kind of butts up against that is, what are some of your greatest what's your greatest obsession right now?
Jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu.
By far. There's something about choking people out that just excites
Got some fun
me.
to it. Yeah. There you go. Okay.
And it releases me. Like it just makes me so calm after that. So
awesome. Little anger management, right?
yeah, exactly.
Nothing wrong with that. Cool. Yep. And then, while we have I want people to understand that when we bring people on like this, the success that you have, you can hear it in the conversation that we're having here. But kind of tell people, what are some of your success habits throughout your day, throughout where it's gotten you to where you are now. So kind of.
Sure. Number one, I get up early and I get shit done. I roll out of bed at 3 a.m. every morning. I've done that for over 20 years. I go to the gym, I work out, I do my jujitsu, and I'm very persistent at it. If I find something that I want to do, I'm persistent at it. I failed a lot. I talked about the EMI.
Mm-hmm.
That took me 18 years to do. And I failed a lot. I lost a lot of money around that, but I was persistent at it. And, for me, it was taking the failures and learnings from them and then turning around, and don't let it discourage you. And don't let people discourage you.
Yeah.
Keep up on the research. Man, it frustrates the heck out of me when I go and do a presentation for a group of PTs and they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's like, have you pulled a paper since, I don't know, 2000? Like it's not new information, right?
Yeah.
So, keeping ourselves abreast of the latest data. And then really, quite honestly, how do you take your art and apply what you've just learned, and
Applied knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the other thing I'll say is have your faith. I'm a firm believer that God put me on a path for a reason. And that's why I'm here today. And I'm blessed to have been married for 29 years. I've got an amazing partner in crime who's been with me the whole way, supported me the whole way. And, I feel very blessed. So
that's awesome stuff, man.
What
shit.
What time do you get to sleep to be able to get up at 3 a.m. and
9.
Okay. You have any strategies for how I could do that schedule with a 9-month-old that doesn't want to sleep? Yeah.
No, not yet.
Yeah.
I had to make modifications when my kids were that age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're sleep deprived right now. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I'm finding. You try to, you go through those tough phases where you try to figure out ways, but I think things find their way to even out. But
it's great military training. Sleep deprivation. It's good for you.
Very good for you.
Well, listen, where can people find you? Where's the best place?
You can go to justrebound.com, and that's our company website, and that's where we live. I also have a personal website, drtrentnessler.com. And then we are launching a new website, combatathletescienceinstitute.com. And that's we're starting a new business around injury prevention in combat athletes.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Mike, where can they find you?
I'm on the Instagram at honeybadger_juicy and on LinkedIn at Mike St. George. It's the two major places I'm at.
Nice. I know you want to add in a little.
I'm also on Instagram too.
There you go. Where can they find you on Instagram?
BJJPT_ACL guy.
Awesome. Mike, did you have another point there that you wanted to add in?
I was going to say that this was awesome, Trent. We really appreciate your time. And as we talked earlier, Joe and I are really trying to build a network, and like you even put us in touch with Courtney Green, and we've been playing some tag and trying to get in contact with her. But I see what she posts on LinkedIn, and she's on the same wavelength as Joe and I. So
I'm telling you.
And that's what we said with the surgeon last night, that we're trying to build this network. And I keep reiterating this at the end of every podcast, because I want the listener to understand that we want to get this education out, because this is a very underserviced area. I think our profession has a lot of work to do, but even the whole healthcare profession, I mean, even everything that happened with COVID, when everything shut down, there was no education on what people should do to take care of themselves. And right now I have tons of patients that are coming in that have just deteriorated over a year because they sat inside, they did nothing, and they didn't know what to do. And they just completely had a 180 in their lifestyle. And there was not enough coming from all these professions to educate people on just simple things on how to take care of yourself, diet. What are some healthier, I'm locked inside. What can I do to eat healthier? That, and other options. What are some simple things I could do, So the educational components, like what I said to you about that athlete, it's like parents really, they don't know the information that's not available because no one is putting it there. So that was our goal of this podcast, is to bring all these great resources and put them out there and continue to network. And I think it's great that you're active on Instagram, because that's what I like to use. I tag people and stuff. I send things that I think might be, someone might be interested in. Like if I come across a podcast thing, like I would send it to you and be, hey, you might really like this because they're talking about, the special forces, jujitsu, things like that, or cool ACL stuff. But the ability to network today is so easy, you know, and
Yeah.
people use social media for some stupid shit, but we could use it for something really powerful like this. I mean, I know Joe and I are really excited to look more into the V Perform system. We want to learn more about that going forward. So we'll have some more conversations, but if we could just get this information out to more of the community, the parents, the coaches, even the athletes get in to listen to this, I think it'd be really powerful and making a difference. It's just, they got to hear it, you know?
It's the first step, education.
Yeah.
Bingo. Again, you can find me at coach_Haas. On Instagram, you can go to LinkedIn. I'm at Joe Haas. You can go to YouTube to see the podcast. And that's under Coach Haas as well. Trent, again, like Mike said, this is an hour and a half of more education on the thing that I'm completely passionate about, that I was a strength coach and I found a gap here. I saw these athletes that were missing this, you know, you had PT and then they're like, okay, you're good. And they're going, and I was like, no, they're not good. There needs to be somebody to step up, jump into that space. I had a pair of balls and I did it, you know, and that's where I'm at. And, again, thank you so much for your time. This was great. A Friday afternoon, we got it in, and hopefully we can get you back on again sometime.
I'd love it. Absolutely love it. Thank you guys so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you guys. Have a great
day. Have a good
weekend.
Yeah, you too.
All right,
Bye.
Trent.